Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, I just quickly want to go over a build I've been theory crafting for the Druid for Diablo 4. I've had a lot of people ask me about how the build works since I've been sharing it on various forums and streams, just trying to come up with a solid build to sort of aim for that doesn't rely on any uniques, sort of in the pre-season and maybe even season 1 if nothing changes. Now, keep in mind, Diablo 4 hasn't actually released yet. It's about a month from release at this point, and all the information here is based on data mined information and the information we have from all the betas and the Server Slam event. Now, this build is for Druid. It is not early game. It's not a leveling build. This is going to be a build to go for once you want to start blasting and speed farming and boss killing. It can do pretty much everything, and I think it's a really interesting concept. Now, keep in mind, things might still change. I'm going to read all the patch notes before the game goes live, and if they change too much, I'll probably come back, make another video where I explain what's broken and what still works and ways to fix the build so that it still functions properly. Now, the core concept of this build is relying on aspect of trampled earth, aspect of aftershock, and symbiotic aspect. What these aspects do in combination is when you use trample, you summon 6 landslide pillars. We're using this on a two-handed weapon, so instead of 80% damage, the landslide pillars will be doing 160% damage. We're then using aspect of the aftershock to increase this damage by 12% and make the landslides trigger twice. On top of that, we're using the symbiotic aspect in combination with the Nature's Fury key passive to reset the cooldowns of our werebear skills or earth skills, which in turn will allow us to cast trample again. That means that we'll be able to, within 1 second, summon 24 landslide pillars and they'll chunk out any boss, pretty much. In essence, this build is just trying to reset the cooldown of trample as much as possible to spawn as many landslide pillars as possible. We're also using the Terramote stacks on the landslide, which guarantees critical strikes with 40% crit damage, and we therefore stack heavily into critical strike damage, just so that we can deal even more damage when we summon 24 landslide pillars. It's also worth noting the aspect of Nature's Savagery here, very important aspect for the build. Basically what this does is your werewolf skills function as storm skills and werebear skills function as earth skills for the Nature's Fury key passive. Now, let's look closer at the Nature's Fury key passive, since understanding how this functions is incredibly important for the build. Basically, when you cast an earth skill, there's a 20% chance to trigger a free storm skill of the same category. What this means is if you use something like Landslide, you have a 20% chance to trigger Tornado. In addition, casting something like Tornado has a 20% chance to trigger something like Landslide. Looking at gear again, the Nature's Savagery just means that we can do the exact same thing, but for werewolf skills and werebear skills. So if we go back to the skill tree here, you can see Shred has a chance to trigger both Landslide and Pulverize now. We want to use as many storm skills as possible, because what we're trying to do is reset the cooldown of Trample as often as possible. So, another aspect that's important to note here is aspect of the Dark Howl. That makes our Debilitating Roar into a werewolf skill, which in turn has a chance to reset the cooldown of our Trample. On top of that, we need to generate a lot of Terramotes. That's why we're using Poison Creeper, both for the poison, the crit, and of course the Terramote stacks. We then use Debilitating Roar. If we look at the aspect of Dark Howl again, Debilitating Roar is now a werewolf skill and it immobilizes poisoned enemies. That means we can use Poison Creeper to poison enemies, immobilize them, and then use Dark Howl, or rather use the Debilitating Roar ability, which will immobilize every single one of those mobs again, and that'll grant us double Terramote generation stacks every time we immobilize with Vine Creeper. On top of that, looking at Paragon Boards, I've only done the first one. This is the most important, it's the Constricting Tendrils. Lucky hit, we have a 50% chance to immobilize enemies and deal poison damage to them. Again, this is just to generate Terramotes, and it's to apply the poison. Poison is incredibly important because the Druids have the Envenom passive, which makes our crit damage deal 30% more damage to poisoned enemies, which is pretty damn huge. For the rest of the build, we're pretty much just picking defenses, trying to stay alive. Aspect of Disobedience, stack armor. You can flex this with anything pretty much. Aspect of Might, really good damage reduction, super simple to use. It stacks really well with the Storm Strike, which gives us another 20% or 25% damage reduction for a total of 45%. Incredibly powerful. And then Exploiter's aspect on the boots, just for even more damage. Going through the skill tree real quick. First skill, Storm Strike. Probably the best generator Druid has. It has damage reduction, 50% chance to apply vulnerable, which is huge. This is where we get our vulnerable from. The first passive also gives us a chance to immobilize, which will generate even more terror mote stacks. We also spec into Wild Impulses just to increase the damage of our landslides by 50% more. 15%, not 50. We're using Shred here because Shred functions as a storm skill which has a chance to reset the cooldown of our trample. This is our main damaging ability, or rather, I mean landslide is, but it's this skill we're using the most. In fact, we won't even have landslide on our bar. There's no need for it. We then also grab the attack speed and the heal. The heal in werewolf form is really powerful. It allows us to sustain a lot of damage. And then also the poison here for the crit damage. We then have Earth and Bulwark, just gives us a big shield, keeps us alive, grants us Unstoppable and grants us Fortify. And here, damage reduction, when we use a defensive skill, 15%, really high. It grants us a total like 60% damage reduction. We have Debilitating Roar, which of course reduces the damage of enemies and immobilizes them if they're poisoned. We apply poison with Shred and with Vine Creeper. As I mentioned before, we use Vine Creeper to immobilize enemies, to poison them, and to grant us more critical strike chance. The reason we want crit chance is because if we look at the Druid class mechanic here, there is one of them. Yes, critical strikes with shape-shifting skills heals us for 3% of our maximum life. Combine that with the Shred, that's 4% max life heal every time we crit. Late game, we'll be critting constantly. Also because of aspect of natural balance, this again grants us even more crit damage for our Earth skills. Landslide guarantees crits, so this is just crit damage constantly, as long as we have terror motes. And it grants us that whenever we use a Earth skill, which Trample is, which Landslide is, it just increases the crit chance of our werewolf skills to give us even more healing. We're then taking Avian Wrath, even more crit damage, and here Energize. I'll probably take this first, 50% chance to restore 10 spirit, incredibly powerful. We need the spirit. And here every 10th kill causes your next Earth skill to overpower. This is a flex spot. It's just having an overpowered landslide which hits 12 times sounds really nice. And that's pretty much the build. I don't think there's anything I forgot to mention. Of course, we use Trample, even more damage with the first passive. And here, Spirit Gen, really important. Envenom, I've already talked about that. Crushing Earth, just fortifying damage with the Earth passives. We're not using any ultimates. If you're playing softcore, you could remove something like Earth and Bulwark, and then maybe grab an ultimate skill. I'd probably go for Petrify, even more crit damage on bosses, incredibly powerful. Now, I hope this build guide inspired you. Keep in mind, Diablo 4 is not out yet. I've already talked about it, but things might change. For now, this is looking like a really promising build, really solid, not relying on any uniques. We've not even got a Shaco in our helmet slot, like every single other build I'm looking at the moment. This is just pure legendary aspects that you can spec into once you probably reach level 50 and unlock your Paragon boards. There's quite a lot of specific legendary aspects you need, and not a lot of them drop from dungeons except for the defensive ones. Other than that, this build is looking super promising. Yeah, I hope you enjoy, and I hope you're as excited for Diablo 4 launch as I am. Cheers and take care.